Okay, questions about screws, to atypical screws and fasteners. Now remember when I explained to you a while ago that if you're driving a nail and you notice that it's splitting the wood, or when the wood starts to shrink, the wood starts to split, and I told you if you take your nail and you dull the tip of it, when you put it in, it actually tears the fibers of the wood instead of just separating them. Because when you drive a fastener, and all it really does is it just separates the wood. It just pushes it apart. So when it dries, it wants to push back. But when you break the fibers, it doesn't have as much elasticity, I guess you could say, put and force feeding back onto it, because now those fibers have been broken. Well, that's how these engineered fasteners with 3/4 cut design works. Now, one, they have great holding power because the depths of the flute. The flute is awesome. But the reason why you don't need to pre-drill these things is because if you notice on the very tip of them, there's these little notches cut into the tip. And what that does as you're driving through the wood, they're hooking the fibers of the wood, literally tearing them, cutting them. So it's breaking the fibers of the wood like the dulled nail tip. And that's why you can drive these things in without a pilot hole or pre-drilling, and why they will not split the wood. And even if the wood dries, the wood has a very extremely low chance of cracking because those fibers have been torn and broken. So these things are a general purpose all around fastener. Now, there are some areas where they cannot be used, but in 80% of construction, you can use these for 80% of everything. The other bonus is these fasteners come in a wider variety of sizes and shapes. Huge selection over conventional lag bolts and most conventional screws. Now, the problem with conventional screws is they're like a nail without a tip. All they do is when they're twisting through, it's just separating, pushing the wood. So that's why you have a chance of wood splitting with a screw or a lag bolt without a pilot hole, because the fibers aren't being broken or torn. They're staying in solid strands, just being pushed apart. And that's why a lot of them come with a self-drilling tip. Some of them will come with a self-drilling tip, and that kind of helps by breaking those fibers down, but doesn't work as good as a 3/4 cut design. Now, lag bolts, you should, like anything over, like I tell people, 1/4 inch, that's where you're going to start drilling pilot holes. These do not have as good holding force or power, and you have a greater chance of stripping out your hole, like a huge chance of stripping out your hole, and also greater chance of pulling out. But there's one place that lag bolts still excel at over these is structural shearing force. The material that most lag bolts are made of is still stronger than any of these engineered fasteners or structural fasteners. They're still stronger. So if you're not too worried about what you're building pulling away, but you're more worried about it shearing down, you might want to look at a lag bolt or a nut and bolt application. But if you're not really too concerned about excessive, and I mean excessive loads, like I'm talking thousands upon thousands of pounds of shearing force, then the spax is going to be that. Like I said, for about 80 to 90% of everything that you do in construction, spax are dominant. And I'm liking to see that the prices are starting to become cheaper. There's other manufacturers making similar fasteners that work the same way, bringing the cost down. Because honestly, I would love to see these fasteners become a primary mainstream, and that like fasteners with a 3/4 cut design, like a 3-cut design, a 4-cut design. They're just superior in so many ways for fastening, and I would really love to see this just become a more universal standard, and I would love to see the prices come down, because even for doing decks, yeah, like deck working and decking, this thing, like this design, just superior. But yeah, there's a little bit more information for you. But the reason why they're so good is because of the 4-cut design, and the 4-cut is primarily these little notches here. It's got 4 different axes of cutting, but right there, that's the secret to them. As it goes through, it's ripping the fibers and cutting the fibers. Because if you do not cut the fibers and you separate them, when the wood contracts on itself, that's where the splitting occurs. Because those fibers are still in one strand, keeping their tensile strength. And if you break that tensile strength. So I hope this made sense, gave a little bit more clarity. Are they an absolute total replacement for lag bolts? For 80 to 90% of the stuff, yes. Yet there's still 10% of things that a lag bolt are still more superior for and should be used for. But in almost every construction application, you will always usually be safe going with the spax, because even the material that these structural screws are made out of are still stronger than your atypical fastener for shearing value, but they also have a higher holding value. So like if you can get like 4-inch and 3-inch screws using this system, I'd go use those over a common fastener. It also depends on your book and budget. But I do love these fasteners so much more. So a little bit more clarity on covering like the fasteners and what the fastener is actually doing when it's going through. But hopefully this gives you a little bit more input on why these things are so damn good and can do what they can do.